Let's look again at the effect of a price control on a market. We'll start with a classic example, the market for rental housing in a city where there's a rent control. If we had a free market for apartment space, we would have people supplying apartments, more apartments being supplied as the price rises, and people demanding apartment space. The demand curve sloping downward, meaning fewer people are willing and able to buy apartments or rent them as the rental price of apartments goes higher and higher. Suppose that a city votes to try to protect its low-income members by imposing a ceiling on the rental price of an apartment. We call this a rent control. So we put in a rent control at this level. This is a restriction, and I'll put a bar over the top of it to represent the price control. It can go no higher than this regulated level. If the equilibrium price of an apartment is $1,000 a month, the city may decide that that's too high and control the price to be $500 a month and no more. If that's the case, what will happen? Well, one thing that could happen is that landlords and tenants simply avoid the rent control and find sneaky ways to get around it. The landlord might charge you $500 to rent an apartment, but also charge you another $500 to rent the key or the air conditioner or the rugs. In that case, you're really paying $1,000 a month for the apartment, and we go right back to our free market equilibrium. That's the case where the rent control is ineffective and avoided. The second case would be where the rent control is actually strictly enforced, and the landlord cannot get more than $500 for each apartment from a tenant. If that's the case, the situation actually becomes very costly. The first thing that happens, as usual with a price restriction, is that all of these landlords whose opportunity cost is greater than $500 a month will simply withdraw their apartments from the market. And the total quantity of apartments rented will drop from this amount right here with a free market to this smaller quantity of apartment space. And we might call this Q bar, the restricted quantity of apartment space that's available in the presence of the rent control. Well, what that tells you right off the bat is there's going to be some kind of deadweight loss. We've got a restriction in trade, and since the original situation was good in some sense, this restriction of trade cannot be an improvement. The second problem is, of course, the problem of rent seeking. Who all wants an apartment at a price of $500 a month? Why, look, all of these people, all the way out the demand curve here, we've got a huge excess demand for apartment space. What usually happens when we have an excess demand? Usually what happens is the bidding mechanism pushes up the price of apartments until we return to equilibrium. In this case, however, the bidding mechanism has been blocked by the price control. Therefore, all of these people who want to rent an apartment for $500 a month will find themselves engaging in non-price competition. Now, what does non-price competition mean in this market? It means trying to get to apartments ahead of other people. It means reading the obituaries in the morning to find out what apartments may have opened up overnight. It also means hiring kamikaze apartment locators. This is locators with very sharp elbows who have a talent for getting to the front of the line for you. That is, taking apartments away from other people to make sure that you get them. Who can afford a kamikaze locator? Well, as these people, all of these potential tenants begin to compete with each other to hire kamikaze locators, the price of locators will be bid up until the true cost of getting an apartment is equal to P prime. P prime is a higher price, perhaps $1,300 a month. $1,300 a month includes the $500 rent, plus an additional $800 that you have to pay to a locator to guarantee that you get the apartment. This is $800 a month, which you might think of as a payment that you owe your locator for having done this service for you. Well, here's the new equilibrium. Tenants pay $1,300 a month, $500 of it to landlords, and $800 of it to apartment locators. And we have a huge deadweight loss. All of this area here represents economic value that's been destroyed by the price control. The price control restricts trade as apartments leave the market because landlords can't cover their opportunity cost. And all of these tenants who can't afford to keep up with the competition are priced out of the market. All of these trades are blocked by the price control. On top of that, you have all of these tenants who are paying money to these kamikaze locators. Now, these are not your usual locators who just happen to have good information about where apartments are. These are people that you hire to go out and wrestle for you, people that you hire to go out and take apartments away from other competitors. They're not really adding any value to society. They're your own hired army that you hire to try to get a bigger share of the benefit for yourself. They're not creating value for society. In fact, they cost society value. Because instead of going out and wrestling for apartments, they could be hooking rugs, writing children's books, assembling computer boards, or doing other things that create value. As they take their time away from value-creating activities and direct it instead into rent-seeking activities, it becomes costly for society. And the amount of the cost is approximated by this area here. That is the amount of money they get paid to attract them away from other valuable activities. If you add up the amount of rent-seeking activity and the amount of deadweight loss, you can see that the price control is very costly to society. All that's left in this market, instead of the big consumer surplus and producer surplus that we had before the price control, is a small amount of consumer surplus up here and a small amount of producer surplus down below. The price control has messed up this market through a deadweight loss and the cost of rent-seeking activities. That's the story about a price control in the market for rental housing. The same story applies if we think about the market for tickets to concerts. You have a demand curve for concert tickets, a supply curve for concerts, and you have a price control, often that's imposed by the act itself, a band that wants to make sure that people get to come and watch it in concert. If there's a price control on the tickets, we wind up with a similar situation. Tickets are sold at a price below the true equilibrium price. As a result, it may be that fewer concerts are produced. Producers of this act or of similar acts may decide that they can't cover their opportunity cost of bringing more art for people to see. Meanwhile, there are a lot of people who would like to see the concert but can't afford it because the price of tickets has been bid up. Once we have a restricted quantity of tickets, people will resort to non-price competition. And you know what that means: standing in line or buying tickets from scalpers. This box right here represents the rent-seeking activity, the cost to society of having people who could be writing children's books standing on a street corner scalping tickets, or the wasted time of people standing in line when they could be doing something productive. Now, you might argue, what if I like to stand in line? Well, if you like to stand in line, you can stand in line. But the point is, you shouldn't be forced to stand in line to allocate tickets. It's cheaper for society if people allocate tickets through the price mechanism. If we want to help people who can't afford tickets get tickets, perhaps we should give them a subsidy or increase their income. But using a price control does not help people in this model who have low incomes. It doesn't help the people who can't afford to pay as much for tickets. In fact, the people who wind up getting the tickets are the people who can afford not only the old equilibrium price, but the higher price that scalpers will charge in this event. The Economist ends this story by saying that price controls rarely achieve their goal. Because price controls often create a situation of shortage, and on top of that, the pressure of non-price competition and the waste associated with it, price controls usually create a bigger mess than the problem they were intended to solve.